The thing that fans mock Tony Khan for might actually be the saving grace for AEW. And I know exactly how that sounds. When some people talk about Tony Khan, they usually say it with a smirk. They call him a money mark. They say Tony Khan is too much of a fan. They say AEW feels like it was built from somebody's dream match notebook. And you know what? Sometimes that criticism has a point. But what if the thing that fans, that people mock Tony Khan for is also the thing that AEW needs most right now? Tony Khan being a wrestling fan with money is not just a punchline. It's the reason AEW exists. And with MyAEW possibly becoming a hub for multiple wrestling promotion, that same fandom right there might become AEW's biggest advantage. Especially coming off AEW Double or Nothing, where whatever issues AEW has, one thing still came to clearly for me. This company still feels like wrestling made by people who love wrestling. Welcome to Pro Wrestling Quickie. I'm Tristen Law, some-retired pro wrestler and your host. You don't have much time, and neither do I. So let's have a quickie. Tony Khan recently talked about MyAEW and the idea of featuring content from multiple different wrestling promotions. And on the surface, it sounds like a streaming story, another platform, another app, another company trying to control its own content. But I think there's something bigger there. Because WWE already had a version of this. If you don't remember, I'm going to remind you. Back in the WWE Network era, WWE had relationships with outside promotions. You had stuff connected to companies like Evolve, Progress, ICW, and WXW. And Evolve is the big one. Evolve went from being an outside promotion with a relationship with WWE to actually being acquired by WWE. And that's not shocking. That's how WWE works. WWE doesn't just create gravity. WWE is gravity. If something gets close enough, eventually it gets sucked into the orbit. And that's not even me saying that as an insult. That's business. In case you didn't know and it's your first time on this planet, WWE is massive. WWE is corporate and they're mainstream, and WWE is owned and operated like a major sports and entertainment property. So when WWE touches outside of wrestling, it becomes about how that outside wrestling can serve WWE. Can it feed NXT? Can it create talent? Can it become content for the content library? Can it be absorbed into the bigger machine? That's always WWE's lane. But AEW has a chance to do something different. AEW does not have to build a network to own wrestling. AEW can build one to celebrate wrestling. And that's where Tony Khan being a fan matters most. Because people say money mark like it ends the conversation, but maybe that is the conversation. Tony Khan had money, or has money. Tony Khan is a wrestling fan. And instead of just buying front row seats or collecting belts or sitting in a skybox somewhere, he built the kind of wrestling company that he wanted to watch. That's why AEW exists. Not because some boardroom looked at a spreadsheet and said, there's an underserved wrestling demographic with monetization potential. No, AEW exists because a rich wrestling fan looked at the landscape and said, there should be another place for this, and asked his daddy for some money. There's nothing wrong with that. Another place for dream matches, another place for wrestlers who did not fit the WWE mold, another place for tag team wrestling, another place for blood feuds, another place for fans who did not want wrestling to feel like one company's version of wrestling. And now, MyAEW could be the next step in that same idea. Not AEW trying to become WWE, but AEW trying to become the home for wrestling fans who still love the whole wrestling world. That matters. Because wrestling fans do not watch wrestling all the same way. Some fans only watch WWE, and I think that's fine. Some fans only want the biggest names, the biggest arenas, the biggest productions, the biggest, cleanest presentation. WWE fits that very well. But there's also another kind of wrestling fan. The fan who wants to discover a promotion they've never heard of. The fan who likes seeing different styles clash in the ring. The fans who remember when wrestling felt like different territories, different flavors, different identities. The fan who does not want every promotion to feel like it went through the same corporate filter before it made it to the big screen. That is the fan that MyAEW can serve. And that is why this cannot just be another content dump. If Tony Khan really wants this to work, MyAEW has to feel curated. It has to feel intentional. It cannot just be, here's AEW, here's ROH, here's some random indie footage, good luck, have fun, give me your money. It has to feel like a wrestling fan built a guide for other wrestling fans. Show me why this promotion matters. Show me who I should watch. Show me what match I should start with. Give me context. Give me personality. Give me a reason to care. That is where AEW can separate itself. Because AEW's biggest strength is not that it has more money than WWE, because I don't think it does. AEW's biggest strength is not that it has better production from WWE. It does not. AEW's biggest strength is that at its best, it still feels connected to the streets of pro wrestling. The feeling that wrestling is bigger than one company, one style, one vision, or one corporate machine. And yeah, Tony Khan's fandom can create problems. Sometimes AEW feels too crowded. Sometimes it feels like too many ideas are happening at once. Sometimes it feels like Tony books with the excitement of a fan who wants to do everything right now. I think that's real. But with MyAEW, that same fandom can become an advantage. Because this is exactly the kind of idea a wrestling fan with resources would have. Not how do I lock everything down, but how do I help fans find more wrestling? That's the difference. WWE's building the biggest wrestling business in the world. AEW has an opportunity to build something that feels like it's for the fan who still love wrestling beyond the biggest stage. And coming off AEW Double or Nothing, that feels important. Because AEW doesn't have to be perfect to matter. It doesn't have to beat WWE at WWE's game. AEW's lane is different. AEW works best when it reminds people that wrestling can still feel unpredictable, messy, passionate, emotional, and alive. And if MyAEW becomes a real hub for multiple promotions, then maybe Tony Khan is not just building another app. Maybe Tony Khan is really building a clubhouse. A place where AEW can live. A place where Ring of Honor can live. A place where indie wrestling can get discovered. Where international wrestling fans can find new wrestling. That's why calling Tony Khan a money mark, it doesn't hit the same. Because yes, Tony Khan is a fan with money. But pro wrestling has always needed people who loved it enough to put real money behind it. That's why I think that Vince McMahon was successful in some places. The problem isn't being a fan. The problem is whether that fandom creates something useful. And MyAEW might be useful. It might be the cleanest version of what makes AEW different. Not perfect, different. Because AEW built a network to own wrestling. AEW might be building one to celebrate it. And that's the bar. Tony Khan's fandom is not just the punchline. It's the reason AEW exists. It's the reason AEW still feels different. And MyAEW becomes what he says it can become. It might be the biggest argument yet that AEW's future is not becoming WWE. AEW's future is being the place that reminds wrestling fans there's still a whole world outside of WWE. I'm Tristen, and that's your Pro Wrestling Quickie.